Picture this. It's a feeling I think we all know a little too well. You're sitting completely alone, staring down at your glowing phone. Your thumb is just hovering right there, over the keyboard. You're in that agonizing, breathless moment right before you initiate a really difficult conversation. Deep down, you know this is something that should probably happen face to face. But right now, in this exact moment, the screen just feels so much safer. Welcome to today's Explainer, where we're going to unpack exactly why we do this. We all know the physical act of what comes next, right? You start to type. You are composing a long, incredibly heavy message. Maybe it's a profound apology for a real mistake you've made. Maybe it's a list of deep-seated grievances you're sending to a partner. Or maybe it's a breakup message. Whatever it is, you are pouring all of this immense emotional weight into tiny digital letters, just tapping away in the quiet, isolated space of your own room. But of course, you don't just type it out once and send it. No way. You hesitate, you highlight an entire sentence and hit delete, you rewrite it. You carefully, methodically curate the tone. You want to make sure it sounds caring, sure, but maybe you also want it cool enough to protect your own pride. What you're really doing is taking the time to perfectly edit your vulnerability. And ultimately, you make the conscious choice to press send. You're choosing the curated, controlled safety of the scream over the unpredictable, messy reality of actually speaking to someone face to face. And the second you press send, the entire dynamic shifts. You wait for the read receipt. You sit there and watch those 3 little gray dots appear and then disappear and then reappear again. In a matter of seconds, the entire emotional situation transforms into this tense, psychological holding pattern that is completely controlled by your screen. You've launched a difficult conversation, yes, but you are experiencing the absolute peak of its anxiety entirely in isolation. So let's get into part 1, the illusion of safety. Why exactly does texting feel so much safer to us than reality? Well, it really all comes down to control. Texting completely optimizes for control. It allows us to manage our tone perfectly through that careful editing we just talked about. It offers timing control, meaning you can delay your response for hours until you feel completely put together. It creates this built-in emotional distance, physically keeping the other person at bay. And ultimately, it prevents us from having to deal with the immediate, raw, unpredictable reactions of another human being. We only have to consume their feelings in tiny, text-sized amounts that we can actually manage. And honestly, a lot of people passionately defend doing things this way. You'll hear sentiments exactly like this quote. We get our ideas out in a cooler way. We can fight without saying things we'll regret. It's incredibly common. So many people actually prefer this idea of fighting by text because they genuinely believe it keeps the peace. They argue that it makes family arguments or romantic disagreements cleaner, calmer, and significantly less dangerous, simply because tempers aren't physically flaring in the same room. But we really have to look a bit deeper at what is actually happening under the surface here. While text absolutely gives us a nice, tidy record of what was said, it is fundamentally driven by our desire for a completely friction-free experience. Think about it. It's a way to effectively dial down human contact. When things get tough, we use our screens to escape the messy, untidy reality of true emotional vulnerability. We want the companionship, but we kind of want to skip the demanding friction of real intimacy. Which brings us to part 2, the friction of reality. When we make the choice to send our absolute hardest words through a text message, we need to be honest with ourselves about what we are actively avoiding. We are escaping the awkward pauses and that suffocating, heavy silence. We're actively avoiding the physical sight of someone's tears. We are sidestepping sudden flashes of anger or deep confusion and unpredictable questions that put us right on the spot. We avoid doing things like breaking up in person because, frankly, we simply cannot bear the visceral, physical reality of seeing the other person's face drop or hearing their voice break. Take a look at this observation from someone reflecting on an in-person conflict they had. They said, "I saw her face. My mom was almost crying. That can't be conveyed via text." The absolute most crucial point here is that the most important part of difficult communication isn't actually the words you end up using. It really isn't. It is the real-time emotional impact that we witness in another person's eyes and in the shifting tone of their voice. And that leads us to a pretty profound paradox. If you ask almost anyone on the street, they will readily tell you that important conversations like a big breakup or a deeply personal apology absolutely deserve our physical presence. Everyone intuitively knows it is the right thing to do. So why do we still consistently choose the digital exit? The quiet, slightly uncomfortable answer is simply this: because it's easier. It is overwhelmingly, infinitely easier to tap a piece of glass than it is to sit in the raw discomfort of another person's pain. Let's look at part 3, information versus real repair. Here is the thing we often mix up. Sending a text message is a fantastic way to send information, but emotional repair, that is an entirely different process. Contrast the purely administrative act of delivering an apology text with the courageous, difficult act of staying physically present. Real repair requires observing the other person's reaction in real time, listening to their voice, and committing to navigating the emotional fallout together, no matter how incredibly uncomfortable it gets. When we just apologize by text, we often create what you could call the artificial truce. This is when you send an "I'm sorry" text primarily just to end the immediate tension in the air, without ever actually resolving the real underlying conflict. If we unpack that a bit further, a texted apology basically says, "Hey, I no longer want to have tension with you, let's just be okay." But at the exact same time, it subtly says, "I am not going to sit next to you while you go through your feelings about this." The result of this, you often get these bizarre situations where two people are passionately arguing through these long, practically essay-length, perfectly edited paragraphs, but neither of them can actually hear a human voice. It leaves this remarkably hollow feeling behind. The sender might put their phone down on the nightstand, let out a sigh of relief, and genuinely think the problem is magically handled because the data of the apology was delivered. But without the physical, messy process of repair, that specific fight is almost guaranteed to bubble right back up. Moving on to part 4, learning through witnessing. The data on what this is doing to us is actually pretty striking. Over the past 2 decades, researchers have observed a staggering 40% decline in the markers for empathy among young adults. 40%. And researchers explicitly link this sharp drop to the overwhelming new presence of digital communication. By constantly removing ourselves from face-to-face conflict, we are actively losing our daily practice in the empathic arts. We have essentially confused composing with witnessing. Empathy is not something you learn by carefully editing your words on a screen until they are perfectly protected and bulletproof. Empathy is learned by being put on the spot. It's learned by making forced eye contact, sitting in the heavy silence, and witnessing exactly how your words land on another person in real time. It requires seeing their body language shift and hearing the subtle nuance in their breath. You just can't get that through a screen. As the research on this brilliantly summarizes, technology does not provide a sentimental education. People do. When we routinely bypass those uncomfortable, messy, completely untidy moments, like looking someone directly in the eye to deliver a difficult truth or a sincere apology, we lose the absolute most crucial training ground for human empathy. We miss out on the very friction that actually teaches us how to care for one another. And finally, part 5, facing the relationship. Now, we have to be fair here and acknowledge that texting can occasionally be a highly effective way to just break the ice. Sometimes a text is a vital first step to initiate a conversation that is simply way too terrifying to start out loud. It can be a bridge. However, the absolutely crucial point here is that important relationships will inevitably demand physical or vocal presence to repair properly. A text can start the process, for sure, but actual presence is required to truly heal the wound. Ultimately, we must stop confusing two very different acts. There is a massive, vital distinction between the purely administrative task of saying, "I sent the message," and the courageous, deeply vulnerable act of being able to say, "I faced the relationship." Sending the hard words might successfully deliver the facts, but staying present for the aftermath, allowing the relationship to honestly change, repair, or even end, that is where our humanity actually lives. So as we wrap up this explainer, I want to leave you with a lingering, slightly provocative thought to take with you today. The very next time your thumb hovers over that send button during a difficult, highly charged moment, stop and ask yourself honestly, are you using your screen right now to truly stay connected? Or are you using it to escape? Are you actually resolving the conflict? Or are you just pressing send and running away? Thanks so much for joining me today, and take some time to reflect on that before your next difficult conversation.